Welcome. Today we're going to deal with modernism. So, if you look into the time period of modernism and postmodernism, we cannot clearly distinguish modernism from postmodernism. In the sense, some people say that postmodernism started with the publication of Jacques Derrida's Structure, Sign and Play in 1966, while others say that it started with Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot in 1955. While modernism was a movement that began during the World War time period. So basically, the distinction between the two is quite hazy. Now, let's look into what modernism is. Modernism is a literary movement that flourished in the 1920s and 30s. The most important part is that it experimented with forms, devices, and styles. So there were a lot of new experimented styles that came about. There was absurdism, there was stream of consciousness technique. And if you look into the broken images, particularly in the very famous poem of T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland, we could say that all of this different kinds of writing techniques originated from The Origin of Species, which was published in 1859. Because 1859, with the publication of The Origin of Species, it marked the erosion of religious belief, and people lost their faith. So faith was troubled. There was the Industrial Revolution coming in. Moral values were destabilized. And in short, along with the World War, there were broken images in the works because people and their life were broken. Broken due to war, broken due to absence of faith. So there was, in short, an identity crisis. And that was very much significant in the works that came about during that time. Nietzsche, he famously said, God is dead, we have killed him. This was a time when works of art rejected humanism, and there wasn't a unity in a work, there was just identity crisis. There was nothing romantic about it, but a fragmentation. This is the famous quote of Friedrich Nietzsche: God is dead, God remains dead, we have killed him. And that was how the time period was. A list of famous modernist writers: Joseph Conrad with his Heart of Darkness, The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, showing absurdism, Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own, famous stream of consciousness technique, Waiting for Godot, Samuel Beckett, existentialism. You see, there are a lot of things, writing techniques that come up here: existentialism, absurdism, stream of consciousness technique, lots of things. Now, modernism is not only literature. Modernism was also part of art, paintings, sculptures. It reflected, as I told you earlier, it reflected loss, despair, disillusionment, fragmentation. Those were the key themes that you find in most of the writings, in most of the artwork that came about during that time. So they gave importance to the stream of consciousness technique. And there was this avant-garde movement that came up. If you look into these paintings, you can see the first one here is named Fountain by Marcel Duchamp, and this shows Dadaism. This is an example of Dadaism. Dadaism is an extremist modernism. While this is Cubism, it's called A Girl with a Mandolin by Pablo Picasso. And so this is Imagism, and that shows a fallen angel, and the fallen angel is carried by two boys who look very depressed. Now, that's probably showcasing the life of people during the modernist era. In short, what is modernist literature? You can see these common themes, these common ideas popping out in most of the texts or art that came out during that time. It was chaotic, pessimistic. There was a fear of a meaningless future. There was post-war trauma because it happened during the World War, right? Which is World War I, 1914 to 18, World War II, 1939 to 45. Loss of spirituality, which was highlighted in Origin of Species. With that publication, it all went chaotic. Disillusionment, existential angst, basically fragmentation. So, as I told you earlier, there were different techniques that came out. One such technique is called Mise en Abîme. This is an example of Mise en Abîme. If you look at this picture, you find a woman holding a tray with a cup of tea and a carton of tea powder, I believe. That's coffee powder, yes. So in that, there is herself. There's a picture of herself in there. And in that picture, she's holding yet another tray. And in that, you'll find herself. So there's a loop of images that go on. And this is called the Droste effect, or this is called the Mise en Abîme. An example of this was something, a play within a play, a story within a story. It's found in Hamlet. The mousetrap scene is a very good example of Mise en Abîme. Pastiche. You see, pastiche is a work of visual art that imitates the style or character of the work of one or more other artists. So it's quite an imitation, but it is not a parody. Parody is completely different. This, if you look at the first two pictures, these first two portraits or these paintings are by two different people. A third person have put these two images in his. Kind of like you could say allusion, a literary allusion may refer to another work, but it does not reiterate it. You know? It's alluding to another work. I've provided some examples of a pastiche. The famous stream of consciousness technique, you would be knowing it's characterized by a flow of thoughts and images, which may not be coherent, which may be quite confusing. But that is the that's what that is what goes through the mind of the character at that time of life, isn't it? So many a times we also have faced such an incident wherein we can't think clearly. What all goes through our mind is quite not cohesive. So that is stream of consciousness technique. Thank you. The next video, I'll move on to what is postmodernism.